स्वामिनामे नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नाम नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारणे विशेष शून्यवादि भाष्टाचार्य जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So welcome back to this Nectar of Devotion session. So till yesterday we have completed chapter 5, the purity of devotional service, and just a quick recap of what all we have seen. We saw the preface, we saw the definition of what is bhakti, rasa, amrita and sindhu, and before that we saw a brief introduction about Srila Rupa Goswami. Then in introduction we saw two primary definitions. One is of Akhila Rasamrita Murti, and then the definition of pure devotional service, Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadinavritam. That. The chapter 1, we discussed about the characteristics of pure devotional service. There are totally 6. Kleshagni Shubhada, like that, it goes on. In chapter 2, we started with Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. What is Sadhana Bhakti? The two divisions within Sadhana Bhakti, that is Vaidhi and Raganuga. And we also saw what is Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, how it is executed, and what are the principles. Then in chapter 3, we discussed about the eligibility of devotional service, who all are eligible for devotional service, and how devotional service, the happiness or transcendental bliss derived from devotional service surpasses all liberation and all material facilities. But although a devotee is not aspiring for karma and gyan, but still he gets whatever is required. All his necessities are fulfilled by the Lord. But the pure devotee does not desire anything. Then finally we saw how pure devotional service is pure and it's open to everyone without any distinction. There is no prayashchita required. The devotee never takes shelter of karma and gyan for any purpose, and persons who are engaged in fruitive activities repeatedly achieve birth and death only, and all debts are cleared by pure devotional service, and Krishna takes special interest in his devotees because they are purified at this point. So today we'll be discussing chapter 6 and we'll also move on to chapter 7. So this, as we have discussed before, from chapter 6 to chapter 14, we'll be discussing about the different angas or different limbs of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, which is there are 64 in total. So this chapter 6 gives a brief introduction or the list of all the 64 items, 64 angas of devotional service. We'll see the list, and as I told yesterday, for some of them there are comments which Prabhupada intersperses between the list itself. So those comments we will see when we actually discuss about them from 7th chapter onwards. Because for most of these items, of most of the 64 items, Srila Rupa Goswami gives a corresponding reference from the Vedic scripture, either from Srimad Bhagavatam or from Padma Purana or from Yamala Tantra, like this. So there are different proofs or evidences or pramanas which establish that this particular aspect of devotional service is authorized, is authentic. So none of it is a speculation from Rupa Goswami's side, and all these things that Rupa Goswami has obtained is from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and most of these limbs are actually described in Chaitanya Charitamrita as well, especially from chapter 19 of Madhya Lila till end of Madhya Lila. From chapter 19 to the end of Madhya Lila is basically these two instances of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructing Sri Rupa Goswami and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructing Sanatana Goswami. So all the teachings with respect to pure devotional service are found within these two sections. So, and these two sections is what is elaborated as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Okay, so most of these limbs or angas of devotional service are explained there. Right? So divisions this is just a list. So first, there are primary 10 regulative principles of bhakti, and they deal with those things that one must do. Anukulyena, anukulyasya sankalpaha. That which is favorable to the Lord must be performed. So these first 10 items of devotional service are speaking about this particular aspect, of which the first 3 are the most important. Okay, Rupa Goswami specifically states that. Then there is secondary 10 regulatory principles of bhakti, which is those things which we should avoid, that which we should not do. That is pratikulasya varjanam. Okay, those things we should not do. So the first 20, so there is the primary 10 and secondary 10. These are the most important items. So if you see when Srila Rupa Goswami speaks about most important items, he gives different numbers for it. One is of the first 10, the first 3 are most important. Of the total of, when we see the category of primary 10, secondary 10 and the rest 44 activities, the first 20 are considered to be essential for practicing pure devotional service. And of all the 64 items, 5 items are most important. Chanting of the holy names, reciting in a dham, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, deity worship, and association of devotees. These 5 items of devotional service are the most important of the 64. So this is the different classifications that Srila Rupa Goswami gives, and we will see as we go through one by one. Once all the 64 items of devotional service are discussed, or rather 59 items of devotional service are discussed, from 60 to 64, Srila Rupa Goswami presents these 5 most important items. And he says if one is able to do any of these 5, then he can achieve success in pure devotional service. He can progress towards bhava and prema, like that. He can achieve love of Godhead by following just one of these principles, just by having association of devotees, just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, worshipping the deity, living in a dham, and chanting the holy name. If you do one of these, success is guaranteed, even if one is not able to follow all the antarangas of devotional service. We will get to that. There's a specific chapter for that itself, where this is chapter 13, right? Yeah. The 5 potent forms of devotional service. So when we come to that, at that time we will discuss how Rupa Goswami specifically speaks about this, right? So today we will start with chapter 6. Yeah. After this, then the next 44 items of devotional service is mentioned. And if you remember, sadhana bhakti is to be executed through one's body, mind, and words. When we are speaking about anushilanam, anukulyana krishnanushilanam. Anushilanam means we spoke about Cheshta Rupa and Bhava Rupa. Cheshta Rupa means the endeavor which is done by one's body, mind, and words. So there are items of devotional service which are carried out by the whole body. So the first 11 speaks about that. So those items which one should do with his whole body. Then from 12 to 16 is one does the seva through his voice. Then through taste, smell, touch, sight, hearing, then mind. And then tadiya seva means surrendering oneself. Then there are mixed also, where 2 things are combined. And the 5 most important items are repeated again because they are the most important. This makes total 44. And then including the first 10 and the secondary 10, it totally comes, the list or the items of a devotional service comes to 64. So, Srila Prabhupada writes, Rupa Goswami states that his elder brother Sanatana Goswami has compiled Hari Bhakti Vilas for the guidance of the Vaishnavas, and therein has mentioned many rules and regulations to be followed by the Vaishnavas. So Hari Bhakti Vilas is considered, or Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati said Hari Bhakti Vilas is the Smriti for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Smriti scriptures are those, the Dharma Shastras, which people within the Vedic culture, they follow. So there are the duties of the different varnas mentioned, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, and how they should act in each of the ashramas, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas. So the duties, the rules and regulations that one should follow is mentioned in his Dharma Shastras. The most famous ones are Manu Samhita, Parashar Samhita, Abhastamba Sutra, like this. So these are Dharma Shastras, and those who are followers of Vedic culture, they follow one of these Dharma Shastras. For us, it is Hari Bhakti Vilas. Okay, but Hari Bhakti Vilas also, at this age, as Kali Yuga progressed, from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time to till this time, we are not even qualified, or it will not be possible for us to follow all the rules and regulations mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas as well. So Srila Rupa Goswami takes out only the essential elements from Hari Bhakti Vilas, and then he gives that as the activities that one should do for performing pure devotional service. So these are the 64 activities which Srila Rupa Goswami mentions. So all the 64 are elaborated in quite some detail in Hari Bhakti Vilas. For example, there is one full chapter itself which around 300, 400 shlokas, only on Ekadashi. How Ekadashi should be followed, what are the rules that one should follow for Ekadashi, how one should do the fasting, how Ekadashi should be calculated, from which time the fasting should start, at which time the fasting should be broken, and all these specific technical details are given. But Rupa Goswami specifically says the Ekadashi fast must be observed. So it's only one item. And the details are taken from Hari Bhakti Vilas, but then one should be sincere about following Ekadashi like this. Similarly, regarding deity worship, there are so many rules and regulations, but Srila Rupa Goswami will not mention those rules and regulations here. They are mentioned in other places. So what he is giving us is the essential items, of which some details are taken up by those who are engaged in that particular aspect of devotional service. Like deity worship. When the pujari goes and does the deity worship, he has a more elaborate process. He has to take care of so many things. When we come to temple, we also engage in deity worship by appreciating the arti that is going on, appreciating the kirtan that is going on. Right? When we come for Mangalarti or Darshanarti or Gaurarti like this, then the offerings which are made to the Lord, it's not that the pujari is only doing the deity worship. Even those devotees who are present within the temple, or in fact everybody, devotees, non-devotees, whoever is present in the temple, they are also considered to be doing deity worship at that point. Okay, it's not only the pujari who gets the benefit, everybody who sees the arti, he gets benefit. And all the lamps which are being offered, the same benefit that pujari gets, the same benefit everyone who is present in the temple hall also gets. So deity worship is being done by us also. Okay, just by being present in that particular ceremony, deity worship is being done. But then there are technical differences. We are not getting into the nitty-gritty or the technicalities of deity worship as the pujari is getting into. So those details are mentioned in other scriptures, the Pancharatra scriptures or in Hari Bhakti Vilas like this. Whereas Rupa Goswami just says that one must engage in deity worship like this. So most essential items from these scriptures are mentioned here. And there are technical details for which only those who are specifically engaged in the service, they can get into the details. For others, it's not required. It's just that it's an anga of devotional service. Whenever deity worship is going on, the devotee should be present there, and that should be it. Like this. So, Srila Prabhupada writes, some of them are very important and prominent. And Srila Rupa Goswami will now mention these very important items for our benefit. The purport of this statement is that Rupa Goswami proposed to mention only basic principles, not details. For example, a basic principle is that one has to accept a spiritual master. Exactly how one follows the instructions of a spiritual master is considered a detail. Right? Srila Rupa Goswami will not mention what should be the mood, what should be attitude, what are the instructions the spiritual master should give, what all one should follow. These are found in the commentaries of the Acharyas, in Srila Prabhupada's purports. In Srila Prabhupada's purports, he gives lots of details of who a spiritual master is, who a prospective disciple is, how he should approach the spiritual master, how the spiritual master should be rendered service, and all those details are given in Prabhupada's purport. But Rupa Goswami did not get into all these details in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He just speaks about the basic principle. Accept a spiritual master, that is one anga of devotional service. And then he moves on. If one is following the instruction of the spiritual master, and that instruction is different from the instructions of another spiritual master, this is called detailed information. But the basic principle of acceptance of spiritual master is good everywhere. Although the details may be different, Srila Rupa Goswami does not wish to enter into these details. Okay. And then he starts listing the different angas of devotional service. So this is just a list. Okay, so I'll not be going through this list. At some places, Srila Prabhupada will make some comment, which, as I mentioned, we will see when that particular anga we discussed in subsequent chapters. Right, so this you can read on your own. And after giving the first list of 10, Srila Rupa Goswami says, these are preliminary necessities for beginning the discharge of devotional service and regulative principles. In the beginning, if a neophyte devotee observes the above mentioned 10 principles, surely he will quickly make a good advancement in Krishna consciousness. So maybe we can read these 10, okay, and we'll get an idea of what we're speaking about. First is accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, being initiated by spiritual master, and learning how to discharge devotional service from him. Obeying the orders of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. So these three are considered the most important by Rupa Goswami. Everything in relation to the spiritual master. Following in the footsteps of great acharyas under the direction of the spiritual master. So this is sadhu marganu gamanam. Sadhu vartmanu vartanam. Right? So this is following the footsteps of great acharyas or mahajanas. Mahajana yeno gatasa pantha. So this is first 4. Then inquiring from the spiritual master how to advance in Krishna consciousness. So the first 5 is only speaking about taking shelter of the spiritual master in connection with Guru and previous acharyas. So one who takes, so of these 10 also, the first 5 seems to be the most prominent. Then being prepared to give up anything material for the satisfaction of Krishna. We have been discussing this. Anya Bhilashita Shunyam. All the other desires should be made to zero and it should be free from jnana and karma. Residing in a sacred place of pilgrimage like Dwaraka or Vrindavan, accepting only what is necessary or dealing with the material world only as far as necessary, observing the fasting on Ekadashi and worshipping sacred trees like the banyan tree or tulsi tree or amalaki tree, means this thing, amla tree. So these are the first 10. So these are the first 10 which is primary, which must be done or which should be done for one to make rapid advancement, make good advancement in Krishna consciousness. The next 10 are, one should give up the company of non-devotees, asat sangatyag. One should not instruct a person who's not desirous of accepting devotional service, should not be very enthusiastic about constructing costly temples and monasteries, earning his livelihood by reading, or he should not read too many books or try to earn his livelihood by professionally reciting Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. He should not be neglectful in ordinary things. He should not be under the spell of lamentation and jubilation, should not disrespect the demigods, should not give unnecessary trouble to living entities, he should carefully avoid the offenses chanting the holy name. One should be very intolerant towards blasphemy of Krishna and his devotees. Without following the above mentioned 10 principles, one cannot properly elevate himself to the platform of sadhana bhakti or devotional service in practice. So these are the first 20 items. Then he specifically states, of these 20, the first 3, namely accepting the shelter of spiritual master, taking initiation from him, and serving him with respect and reverence, are the most important. Then he speaks about the next 44 items. Right? So we will see when we come to that in the subsequent chapters. So once he gives the list of 44, then he says, now the total regulative principles come to an aggregate of 64 items. As we have mentioned, the first are the primary 10, the secondary 10 regulative principles, and added to these 44 other items, totally makes to 64. Of these 64 items, 5 items, namely worshipping the deity, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, associating among the devotees, Sankirtan, or chanting the holy names, and living in Mathura are very important. The 64 items should include all of our activities of body, mind, and speech. As stated in the beginning, the regulative principle of devotional service enjoins that all of our senses must be employed in the service of the Lord. Exactly how they can thus be employed is described in above 64 items. Now, Srila Rupa Goswami will give evidence from different scriptures supporting the authenticity of many of these points. Okay, so this completes the chapter. So this is what it is. The first 10, next 10, then 44. And then after that, we move on with evidences regarding devotional principles. What are the proofs? What are the evidences that what is being mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami, these are indeed the angas of bhakti. So first is accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Tatra Guru Padashrayo. And he gives a reference from 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd chapter, verse 21, where Prabhupada tells Maharaj Nimi, my dear king, please know for certain that in the material world there is no happiness. It is simply a mistake to think that there is happiness here, because this place is full of nothing but miserable conditions. Any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. Everyone should try to find such a bona fide spiritual master in order to fulfill his mission of life, which is to transfer himself to the plane of spiritual bliss. So the first point is that one should know for certain that there is no happiness in this material world. That is the impetus for one to approach a guru. Nowadays, in Kali Yuga specifically, and specifically recently, the times in which we live, guru is not approached for that purpose. Guru is approached for prestige. Guru is approached because there are deities at home and there is nobody to worship. So someone is coming, some priest comes or the guru comes to the worship. He's a paid servant. And people keep guru for their own pride. People keep guru for advancing in material prosperity like health, or marriage problems, or for doing yoga and other such things like this. So guru is approached only for material benefits, but guru should not be approached for the material benefits. One has to understand that there is no happiness in this material world. So that's the reason. And one who's seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada will speak about this here. And he says, the purport is that one should not accept as a spiritual master someone who is a fool number one. Right? One should not accept spiritual master who is a fool number one, who himself does not know that this material life or material world is full of miserable. It's miserable. It's misery. He wants to make things happy within this material world. Right? Happiness, or we say art of living. It's not actually art of living. What do we say? It's art of dying. The consciousness which we have at the time of death takes us to the next destination. But the so-called guru, they only teach about how we should live in this material world, how we should be happy in this material world. But there's no happiness in this material world. So when the guru himself does not know that this material world is full of miseries, he cannot even understand that although we don't want to die, but still there is death, there is birth, there's old age, there's disease, and there are these three different miseries also, Adi Bhautik, Adhyatmik, Adi Devik. And does not matter how much we try to tune these things for our own purposes, it never works out that way. The only thing is we have to be humbled by all these miseries to understand that we are not in control. But still, these bogus gurus, so-called gurus, what do? They just keep on injecting this idea into people that they can somehow be happy within this material world. So therefore, they are fool number one. And because they are fool number one, all the people who are following them, they are also fools only. Andha yathande rupaniyamana. They are just a blind leading another blind into a ditch. If a blind person cannot see and other people are following him by holding his hands, if he falls into a ditch, the other will also fall into the ditch. Correct? So therefore, spiritual master, a guru should not be fool number one. And only Srila Prabhupada writes like this. No, this is revolutionary actually, because the concept of accepting a guru is prominent within Indian culture. And it's prominent even now also. Those who think, or those who are from this Indian culture, who are basically Indians, or those who have some sense of Vedic culture, they know that they must have some guide, some guru. Okay, but how that guide should be, he should not be a fool number one. That's Prabhupada's point. He or one should not accept one who has no direction according to the scriptural injunctions. So this is also very important. And when we were discussing in Sri Ishopanishad, we started with this Vaishnava epistemology. And we were discussing about how those items or those things which are mentioned in the Shastra, those are the perfect pramanas for us to take up to achieve the goal of happiness. We discussed primarily about these three pramanas. We discussed 10, but we spoke about these three, Pratyaksha, Anumana and Shabda. So, and we saw the futility or faults in Pratyaksha and Anuman Pramana. Pratyaksha is because of our imperfect senses and because of our incorrect understanding. Pratyaksha and Anuman does not give us perfect knowledge. But one has to take up Shabda Pramana, which is followed by the Acharyas, or which is given by the Supreme Lord himself, and which is given by... So Supreme Lord gives the Shastras, the Acharyas follow it, they perfect their life, and taking them as examples, then we follow the Shastras as well, because that's what the Guru recommends. So one who has no direction according to scriptural injunction, he cannot be a spiritual master. Nowadays, this new idea has come that one goes to a mountain, meditates for some time, and then after that he gets enlightened. This enlightenment, they say, I got spiritual realization, enlightenment, and then I want to share it with others. I have this compassion to share it with others, and then they speculate something in their mind and share it, whatever nonsense they have speculated, and think that it will give them, or rather propagate and preach that this will give them all kinds of benefit. So famous examples from all this Ravi Shankar or Jaggi Vasudev, what kind of scriptures do they follow? They don't follow any scripture. They have no scriptural understanding and they are not coming in any parampara also. And if you ask them how they got spiritually enlightened, they say, I was sitting and meditating. And then that Jyoti or Jnana or that enlightenment came, and then that they want to propagate. So they want to benefit other peoples also. So therefore they propagate that whatever nonsense they have achieved. And who is giving them that so-called enlightenment? It's Maya. It's the material energy of the Lord. They are so sinful that they want to propagate, they want to cheat. And what does Kali does? Kali gives them all the so-called ideas, enlightenment, something which they think that is more transcendental to everything that people have experienced till now. So they themselves believe that what they're saying is correct. They themselves believe what they're saying is correct because it is injected into them by the personality of Kali. Because Kali propagates this. That is his role. So Kali propagates that. So they are the agents of Kali. Because Kali is propagating all this misinformation through them. And then they keep on. And they are awarded. And because we are also foolish, or the Indians who had this such a brilliant Vedic culture, we are also foolish. We are giving them awards. No, this Jaggi Vasudev was given Bharat Ratna, the topmost award in India. To him, it was given to him by President in somewhere 2017 or 2018 for whatever spiritual knowledge he has shared with other people. So nobody knows. The leaders do not know what is proper. You know, Kshatriyas we discussed, right? Kshatriyas are supposed to uphold what is proper dharma. And if someone is not following dharma, he should be executed. He should be killed. He should be ostracized from the society. But if the king himself does not know what is the proper dharma and he is not taking guidance from those brahmanas who know what is proper dharma, sadharma, then what happens? These kind of things happen. Kali has entered everywhere and he propagates, and that's why people in wholesale are going to hellish condition. Prabhupada said, wholesale slaughter, wholesale going to hell. So that is what is happening because they do not follow any scriptural injections. It's all into mental speculation. And they are in the agents of Kali because there is no piety in their life. Because there is no piety, they become the agents of Kali. Those who follow the principles of scriptures, those who are pious, those who follow the principles of purity and cleanliness, then Kali will not be able to attack them. That's why we say four regulative principles must be followed like this. Because that maintains purity. Otherwise, the nature of this world itself is such that it degrades one. A person becomes sinful. And the more a person degrades himself more and more, he finally ends up becoming the agent of Kali. Kali acts through him, and then he propagates all this nonsensical things throughout the whole world. So, should be very careful. One should be very careful of which guru he chooses. Whose character is doubtful, who does not follow the principles of devotional service, or who has not conquered the influence of the 6 sense-gratifying agents. So, these are the 6. Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jibha vegam, udarapasto vegam, etan vegane ukshite dhira, tasmad vipimam, prithvim sashishyat. So, one who has controlled these 6 sense-gratifying agents, he can make disciples all over the world. But what do we see? The so-called guru or the so-called sadhus of this world, ultimately, over a period of time, a news comes that they are associating illicitly with some women. It almost always happens with everybody. It almost always happens with everybody. All these gurus. So either they are smoking, or either in anger they did something, or either primarily illicit sex is what it ends up with. So many examples are there. So to accept such a spiritual master is the crucial point for advancement in spiritual life. One who is fortunate enough to come under the shelter of bona fide spiritual master is sure to traverse the path of spiritual salvation without any doubt. Right? So, in Nectar of Instruction, so there are some references which we should understand, because Srila Rupa Goswami says that the first 3 items are the most important. So we'll spend some time to understand what acceptance or what it means to take shelter of a spiritual master. So we'll be reading some references, and as we go, then we will move along. So this is from Nectar of Instruction, verse 5, Srila Prabhupada writes, one should not accept a spiritual master without following his instructions. So this is again something which is prominent in the outside society as well, and it is also becoming prominent within ISKCON. So Srila Prabhupada famously gives this example of Christians, and he used to say that because who is the better Christian? Where are the Christians? Those who follow the precepts of Jesus Christ, they are Christians. But nobody is following the precepts of Jesus Christ. They just say, you believe in Jesus, and then that's enough. So Prabhupada, what did he say? He says, we are the followers of Christ. We are perfect Christians. But those who claim to be Christians, they are not perfect Christians. There are so many conversations in which Srila Prabhupada speaks like this. Because we claim to be someone's follower, but then we do not follow what he has taught. Okay, so when Prabhupada was preaching, he used to speak about Christianity like this, and other religious institutions also. But this has become prominent within ISKCON as well, where one takes to Guru, or one takes initiation from him and thinks that everything is complete, that his perfection has achieved, but he does not want to follow the instructions. So when Guru Padashraya is mentioned, taking shelter of the spiritual master does not mean that we take only initiation from him, but does not follow his instructions. One must follow the instructions of spiritual master as well. Nor should one accept a spiritual master just to make a fashionable show of spiritual life, just for pride. One must be jigyasu, very much inquisitive to learn from the bona fide spiritual master. The inquiries one makes should strictly pertain to transcendental science. So Guru is not there to serve us. We are there to serve the bona fide spiritual master. So we should not use the Guru for obtaining material benefits. Give me blessings for this, for that, for obtaining my material benefits. That should not be done. The word Uttamam refers to that which is above material knowledge. Tama means the darkness of this material world, and Ut means transcendental. Generally, people are very interested in inquiring about mundane subject matters, but when one has lost such interest and is simply interested in transcendental subject matters, he is quite fit for being initiated. So this is a pre-qualification for Diksha. One must be interested or one must be disinterested in mundane subject matters. When one is actually initiated by the bona fide spiritual master and when he seriously engages in the service of the Lord, he should be accepted as a Madhyama Adhikari. The word Guru means heavy, heavy with knowledge. And what is that knowledge? Tat Vijnana. That heaviness is Brahmanishtha, attachment to Brahman and to Parabrahman, Bhagavan. That is the Guru's qualification. Brahmane upashamashrayam. According to Munda Kumarishat, Tad Vijnanartham Zagurum Eva Vigachet. In order to understand that transcendental science, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. And how should he be? Tad Vijnanartham Zagurum Eva Vigachet, Samit Pani Shrotriyam and Brahmanishtam. These are the two qualifications of a bona fide spiritual master. He himself should have learned the practices of devotional service, or he should be a follower of the Shruti. He should have heard the principles of devotional service from his own spiritual master. He should be Shrotriya. And Brahmanishtam. So after hearing the principles of devotional service, he himself should be practicing it. So there is Achar and there is Prachar also. So he himself should understand it. He should embody that in his life. And then he can make disciples, which is a form of preaching. So Acharan should be perfect. So he should be Brahmanishtam. He should be situated in transcendental platform. Okay. He himself should be Anyabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karma Dhyanavartam, Anukulena Krishna Anushililam Bhaktiruttama. His life should be molded on these principles. Then he's a bona fide spiritual master. One who does not have these things, then he is not a bona fide spiritual master. A bona fide guru does not impart some self-styled, concocted knowledge. Right? His knowledge is standard and received from the parampara system. Correct? So the knowledge does not change. The instructions do not change. The lectures do not change. We see when Prabhupada used to lecture, each and every lecture will have different aspects of devotional service, different understandings from the Shastra, but it will be concentrating on one particular point. Most of it, like we are not this body, we are spirit soul, we are part and parcel of Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We have to render service unto Him. Ultimately, everything boils down to that. So when we say that devotee knows everything, it means all the material objects around him or everything that he possesses, everything that's available to us, one has to see, one's vision should be such that he can dovetail that to Krishna consciousness. One can see it from Krishna conscious perspective. So therefore, it seems variety. There is so much variety within this material world. There's so, not in the material world, but there's so much variety within devotional service as well. But the principle is the same. Everything should be engaged in Krishna's service for His pleasure. So that is the basic goal. And the knowledge, therefore, is standard. So each and every classes will always have this point that Krishna is Supreme Lord. We have this part and parcel. We have to render devotional service on Him. Because this is something which we do not accept very easily because of our stubbornness. Because we are stubborn, we don't want to accept it. Therefore, we have to be told the same thing again and again, again and again, again and again. And that is how we accept. That's how purification would happen. So therefore, it's not something new that someone has to speak. So lectures, there is not something that someone new has to be spoken. No, we hear that, the unseen, untold stories of Ramayana, the untold stories of Mahabharata, those stories which nobody has heard before. Now suddenly someone has come up with those stories. And even these Kathakars, they will tell so many different stories with the characters from different scriptures, from Puranas and Itihasas, which you will not find anywhere in any of the Shastras. So those things should not be encouraged. We should not be trapped into thinking that these are bona fide stories or bona fide instances which actually happened in history. There are so many stories which I have heard, but then they have no basis in the Shastra. These are the instances or histories which are not narrated by any of the acharyas. And such kind of things are all over the internet. So one should be very careful that one hears only from bona fide spiritual master and does not get into all these different things where people come up with so many different kinds of stories. Right? Oh, there are so many instances for this. Some people say, it's actually a big offense. Some people say that, it was just one instance, how bogus it is that they say Draupadi was actually attracted towards Karna, but not the five Pandavas. But throughout her whole life, because she could not do anything about that, so therefore, she lived a life of sacrifice. Because although she was attracted to Karna, she could not give up the five Pandavas because the five Pandavas are more powerful than Karna. Okay, it's actually very offensive, but then these are the kind of stories that moves around, and one should not be attracted by that. And there's another story also that goes like uh, when uh, when when the Pandavas were losing in this gambling match, then Krishna was not there. Correct? He was fighting with Shalva at that time, so therefore he was not present at that time. And Uddhava later, when he meets Krishna, he asks in a very blunt and direct way that why did you not go and help the Pandavas? I just want to know about this first before I speak to you anything else. I don't exactly, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not exactly remember what this story was, but then there's no instance in any of the Puranas or any of the Shastras where Uddhava asks such a question in a very arrogant way to Krishna. So he says, no, they are these devotees, but then why have you done like this? Why have you done like this? You are to be blamed. That's the attitude with which he approaches Krishna. But Uddhava's attitude, mood is not like that. But then these stories move around. And then we have this social media also. We read these kind of stories and then we think this is authentic. And then we get into this doubt. But acharyas, when they give their commentaries, when they explain Shastra, what is given in Shastra, we should also try to imbibe the personality of these people. What is their mood? What is their attitude towards the Supreme Lord? How do they interact with devotees? We see specifically in this particular story, Uddhava will never do that. See, even when he met Maitreya, even when he met Vidura, which is explained in third canto, he was so, as soon as Krishna's name was mentioned, he completely melted actually. And he went into a very deep meditation about Krishna, his pastimes, and he started recounting all those things without even thinking that who is or what Vidura is asking about. Vidura asked him a particular question, but then that question triggered a thought process in Uddhava, and then he completely immersed himself into these thoughts of different pastimes of Krishna. So he is not arrogant, right? He will not ask these kind of questions. That is understood from what our acharyas, from what Srila Prabhupada has taught us. But still, these kind of questions go around. So, knowledge is standard. Things are standard. The acharya's commentary is what is bona fide. So one should not think, or one should not think that something which the acharyas have not given, you will find somewhere else. And this happened even during Prabhupada's time. So Prabhupada used to teach, or Prabhupada gave so many lectures. He brought people to Krishna consciousness. And these disciples of Srila Prabhupada, when they came to India, then knowing the history, some devotees in Gaudiya were envious of Prabhupada. This Prabhupada himself told that they are envious, and therefore they said, oh, Prabhupada is teaching is fine, but then it's not the ultimate goal of life. He's not giving you the Rasika Bhav, the Prema Bhav and others. So you come to me, I'll give you initiation, and then you can advance even more rapidly. I'll give you your Sthai Bhava now itself, like this. And they used to reinitiate. But it's actually very offensive, which says if someone else, some other person reinitiates a person who's initiated by a guru, it means that particular guru is not bona fide. Correct? So when Srila Prabhupada's disciples are initiated by another guru who is in line of Bhakti Siddhanta, but is opposed to Srila Prabhupada, when he reinitiates the disciple of Srila Prabhupada, what happens is he's basically saying that Srila Prabhupada is not the authentic guru. He cannot take you back to Godhead. Whatever he's doing, he's cheating. He's cheating you. He's just telling you that he's not, whatever he's telling, it's actually cheating you because you will not be able to go back to Godhead. I will give you something by which you will attain the highest goal of life. So it's very offensive that way. So one must make sure, or one must understand that the spiritual master is one who's specifically situated. You should see the activities of the spiritual master and how much engaged he is in pure devotion, how much Shrotriya he is, how much Brahmanishta he is. And then we should take shelter of him. That's the point. So these are his two qualifications. He must have heard Vedic knowledge to disciplic succession, and he must be established in service to the Supreme Lord. Correct? Right. So these are the further qualifications of a guru. The guru must be well versed in Vedic literature, know its conclusions, and he must have adopted the path of Vedic principles without deviating in any way. He must be finished with all hankerings for wealth, women, and prestige. He must be fully situated in spiritual life, completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should try to find such a personality and accept him as one's spiritual master. Then, okay. So in Padma Puran, this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela. In Padma Puran, this purport of this particular verse 24:330. In Padma Puran, the characteristics of the Guru, the bona fide spiritual master, have been described. The Guru must be situated on the topmost platform of devotional service. There are 3 classes of devotees, and the Guru must be accepted from the topmost class. Remember, we discussed about Kanishtha, Madhyama, and Uttama. These are the adhikaris for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So one can take initiation from an Uttama adhikari who is within the realm of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti also. Okay, so normally it is said, this is again a statement, or one statement, but an issue that goes on within ISKCON. The Ritvik people say that nobody is on the level of Prabhupada. Oh, he's Mahabhagavata. And none of his disciples are Mahabhagavatas. Therefore, Prabhupada is the only guru. And all the other gurus, they're all bogus. They're all cheaters. Because they're claiming themselves to be gurus. They're giving initiation also, but they will not be able to transmit perfect transcendental knowledge. They will not be able to take one back home, back to Godhead. But here, Srila Prabhupada specifically writes that the first class devotee is the spiritual master for all kinds of people. He must be accepted from the topmost class. And in Nectar of Devotion, he says, there is Kanishtha, there is Madhyama, there is Uttamadhikari also. And this Uttamadhikari, we saw there are 12 different qualities of Uttamadhikari. Correct? He is completely situated in the understanding of Vedic scriptures. He can argue on the basis of Shastra. He himself has unflinching faith, and so on. So that a person who has this, although he might not have attained the stage of Bhava and Prema, he is qualified to make disciples. One who has controlled the 6 urges is qualified to make disciples. So he may not be on the level of Bhava and Prema. He may not be a Mahabhagavata, or he might not be a liberated person in that sense that he is coming directly from the spiritual world. But one who sincerely follows is eligible to make disciples all over the world. That is the proper understanding. Correct? But the Ritviks, they do not understand. They say, you show me a Mahabhagavat, and then I can accept him as the spiritual master. But a Mahabhagavata is not understood by a neophyte. We are all neophytes, or at most on the Madhyama platform. So how will we be able to determine whether one is a Mahabhagavata or not, whether one is Uttamadhikari or not? It's not possible. A Kanishta can never understand who is a Uttamadhikari. That is its defect. And if we think that there is no Mahabhagavata, then how will you identify who is a Mahabhagavata? Because the Ritviks also say this, right? That we will wait for someone. We'll wait for the Mahabhagavata to come, and then we will accept him as the next Acharya. But how will you find out who is that Mahabhagavata when you yourself are on a Kanishta platform? It's not possible. But then they make all these kinds of arguments. So the point is, a spiritual master has to be an Uttamadhikari in the sense, or actually Srila Prabhupada writes that one can accept initiation of spiritual master who is a Madhyamadhikari also. Okay, but he will not be able to make progress from that level to Uttamadhikari platform. So the spiritual master, again, when we speak of Uttamadhikari, just want to clarify that this is still under the realm of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti only. We are not speaking about the higher realms of Bhava and Prema. So if a Kanishta, if a disciple or a student takes initiation from a Kanishtadhikari, it's very difficult for him to go to Madhyamadhikari platform. Okay, because the spiritual master is on the Kanishta level. If one takes initiation from a Madhyama Adhikari, he can go only till that platform, because only that much he can teach to his prospective disciple. If he really wants to progress to Uttamadhikari, he has to take Shiksha from someone who is on that platform. He might have taken initiation from Kanishta Adhikari, but then if he wants to progress or he wants to go further to Madhyama and Uttama platform, then he has to approach that person not to take initiation. Initiation is done, but he can take Shiksha from that person. And this is actually the offense that the God brothers of Srila Prabhupada made. They thought Srila Prabhupada is not on the Uttama platform. Oh, he's Mahabhagavata, he's on the level of Prema. But they said he's not even Uttamadhikari. He's either can be considered as Madhyama or be a Kanishta. I am a Uttamadhikari, therefore I will give you initiation. And then I will take you to the higher realms. like this. But it's not like that. So they thought, they basically minimized the position of Srila Prabhupada, and that's the offense that they made. So this is what it is. So Uttamadhikari is best. He's the first class person to take initiation from. And that's what Srila Prabhupada writes here. The Mahabhagavata is one who decorates his body with tilak and whose name indicates him to be servant of Krishna by the word Dasa. He is also initiated by a bona fide spiritual master and is expert in worshipping the deity, chanting mantras correctly, performing sacrifices, offering prayers to the Lord, and performing Sankirtan. He knows how to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and how to respect a Vaishnava. When one has attained the topmost position of Mahabhagavata, he is to be accepted as Guru and worshipped exactly like Hari, the personality of Godhead. Only such a person is eligible to occupy the post of a Guru. However, if one is highly qualified but is not a Vaishnava, he cannot be accepted as a Guru. Right? So what is the definition of Mahabhagavat? It does not say one who has attained pure love of God. There's no statement like that here. All these are very practical. He decorates his body with tilak. His name indicates that he's a servant. He's initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. He's expert in worshipping the deity. He chants the mantras properly, performs sacrifices, offers prayers to the Lord, performs Sankirtan, and he knows how to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's a Mahabhagavat. Right? And one should take initiation from him. So next is accepting initiation. So first one was is Tatra Guru Padashraya. One should take shelter of the spiritual master. So before one takes initiation, Diksha, one should take shelter of the spiritual master, and the spiritual master and the disciple, they, as Prabhupada said, they test each other. It's actually not a test, but it's actually a kind of a test or examination where the disciple sees or studies the qualities of the spiritual master, and the spiritual master also sees whether the disciple is qualified enough. Does he has the eligibility to take to pure devotional service? Can initiation be given to him? So there is this trial period, you can say, between the spiritual master. So that's when the disciple, after doing this, he takes shelter of the spiritual master, accepting that I want to be initiated by you. I want to be instructed by you. Then the next step is taking initiation, accepting initiation. Shri Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam. So Diksha means one has to take instructions also. So this we have also heard several times in different lectures, that Diksha does not mean it stops with that point. Initiation, then it should continue with instructions, receiving instructions from the spiritual master. So this is Prabuddha continuing to in the same canto. My dear king, a disciple has to accept the spiritual master, not only as spiritual master, but also as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul. In other words, the disciple should accept the spiritual master as God, because he is the external manifestation of Krishna. Right? Several verses in Shastra confirms this. Acharya mam vijaniyam, nama manihena karichit, namarte buddha suyeta, sarva deva mayo guruhu. Then even during morning, sakshat haritvena, during Mangalarti we sing this. Spiritual master should be accepted as good as God, as an external manifestation of Krishna. Right? We also in Bhagavad Gita also, Srila Prabhupada writes that a disciple is guided from within by Krishna and from without by the spiritual master, who is an external manifestation of the super soul. This is confirmed in every scripture, and a disciple should accept the spiritual master as such. One should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously and with all respect and veneration from the spiritual master. Hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam is the religious process which elevates one to the platform of serving and loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So specifically, the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam should be learned. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. So I think we have discussed this before, that understanding spiritual knowledge is not a question of one's intelligence. It's a question of one's attitude. To advance in pure devotional service, to understand the Sambandha Gyan, who is Krishna, who are we, what is our relationship with him, and then acting accordingly, it's actually not a matter of intelligence. So it does not mean that the Shudra, or one who is not much intelligent, or one who is even lower than a Shudra, cannot take up to pure devotional service. We saw that, right? Eligibility of devotional service is one who has unflinching faith. Does not matter which caste he comes from and which place he comes from. All these things are immaterial. So devotional service or advancement in Krishna consciousness does not depend on one's intelligence. It depends on one's attitude. If one's attitude is favorable towards Krishna, then This is what it is. Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam. If one has this attitude, he can advance in devotional service. He can progress in bhakti. So attitude is the most important. This is confirmed with the Vedas, and Rupa Goswami will further explain that for a person who has unflinching faith in God and the spiritual master, everything becomes revealed very easily. Right? Yasya deve parabhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau tasyaita khatita hyartha prakashante mahatmanaha. So the knowledge is revealed by one who has unflinching faith in Krishna as well as the spiritual master. So the translation of this particular verse from Srimad Bhagavatam goes like this. And we will read the purport as well. Okay, let's read the purport. According to Sri Sridhar Swami, the Lord's tendency to give himself to his pure devotee is demonstrated in the case of Bali Maharaj, who sacrificed his universal kingdom for the pleasure of Lord Vamanadev. You see, okay, where is it? Okay, chalo, let's read the translation. This is the actual translation of this verse. Accepting the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity, the disciple should learn from him the process of pure devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, the soul of all souls, is inclined to give himself to his pure devotees. So Supreme Lord is inclined to give himself to his pure devotees. Therefore, the disciple should learn from the spiritual master to serve the Lord without duplicity and in such a faithful and favorable way that the Supreme Lord, being satisfied, will offer himself to the faithful disciple. Right? According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Lord's tendency to give himself to his pure devotee is demonstrated in the case of Bali Maharaj, who sacrificed his universal kingdom for the pleasure of Lord Vamanadev. Lord Vamana was so pleased by the selfless surrender of Bali Maharaj that the Lord became the doorman in the palace of Bali, who was reinstalled as a great leader in the universe. So the service that Bali Maharaj gave, he was not expecting Lord Vamanadev to become his doorman or his doorkeeper, his gatekeeper. But still, the Lord gave himself to him. Sri Jiva Goswami comments that the spiritual master is to be considered the Atma, or the very life of the disciple, since real life begins when one is initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. See, the verse itself says, Atmatmado Harihi. So one should accept, or one should think of one's spiritual master as good as the Lord. He is the very life of the disciple. Although one may experience many seemingly wonderful or important events in a dream, one's real life begins when he wakes up. Similarly, since the spiritual master gives birth to the disciple by awakening him to spiritual life, a bona fide disciple understands that his spiritual master is the very basis of his life, because he has given birth to his spiritual life. According to Sri Jiva Goswami, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all pleasure, and thus the Lord's giving himself to a pure devotee indicates that such devotee becomes immersed in the highest possible ecstasy. In this connection, there is this following Shruti mantra: Ananda Dhimani Bhutani Jayante. Indeed, it is from the all blissful Supreme that all these creatures have come into being. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has further pointed out that when the Lord bestows his own self upon a pure devotee, such a fortunate devotee can actually see the Lord, touch him, and directly engage in his service. So all this is possible when a disciple takes diksha from the spiritual master, serves him, takes instructions from him, and serves him nicely and intently. Because the spiritual master is non-different from Krishna, if the spiritual master is satisfied, then Krishna also is satisfied. And the spiritual master is being on the same level as Krishna. Krishna gives himself to the devotee, just like the spiritual master is favored to give instructions to his disciple. So therefore, one should never become envious of the Guru. According to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, one should never consider one's spiritual master to be mundane or on an equal level with one's self. Sometimes the person servants of the Guru, sometimes they think because they're closely interacting with the spiritual master, with the Guru, and they're taking care of the Guru's bodily necessities as well. Of all the bodily activities that the spiritual master performs, the disciple or the servant of the Guru, he takes very close care of all these things. There's a very high chance that the servant might get into a mood thinking that the spiritual master is also like me only. He has also the same bodily necessities. He was also feeling hunger. He's also getting tired. He also wants to sleep. He also has to do his morning duties and all those things. He also needs, different, he has to walk here, to go there. He requires me for all his bodily necessities. And these are the same things which I also do. So, there's this chance of complacency that can creep in the disciple's mind. So one should be very, very careful that if he's personally serving the body of the spiritual master, he should not get into this kind of an attitude. One should not think of one spiritual master to be mundane because he also has his bodily requirements or on an equal level with oneself. One should see the spiritual master as being always under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. One should never try to engage the spiritual master in one's personal service with the mentality of lording it over the spiritual master and attaining through him some material gain. One who is actually advancing will become more and more eager to serve the spiritual master, and thus such a disciple experiences the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is an instance which Gokul Prabhu mentions that when he was with Danvir Maharaj, then the temple president there, they had to construct a temple or they wanted some donations. So they were going to conduct a particular program for all these people for basically collecting donations and other things. And these people have not been told about Krishna consciousness in a direct way, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are his part, we have to give up everything material and we have to take up to this consciousness. We have to render devotional service like this. But they wanted to collect donations in the name of Danvir Maharaj. So what they said, they came and told Danvir Maharaj that this is a program that we have to do in this particular hall. So Danvir Maharaj is happy. Yes, chalo, let's go and do preaching. And then he said, but Guru Maharaj, you should not tell about Krishna. What kind of preaching is that? If I'm not going to tell about Krishna, what kind of preaching is that? So he said, no, we are expecting some donations from this different people are there, important people are going to come. If we talk about Krishna, then whatever, he did not tell all these things, I'm just paraphrasing. So if we tell about Krishna, then they might get offended. And they might not be able to give us much donation, but we need this for seva and this thing and that thing and all. And Maharaj finally said, no. If you want me to come, I speak about direct Krishna consciousness. Because the idea is that the spiritual master goes, the sannyasis goes to different places to enlighten them. That is his service. He is there to serve the Supreme Lord. He is there to serve the acharyas, the spiritual master, his own guru. He is not there to serve the mentality of different people. So Dhanvir Maharaj said, I will not go. If I go, I speak about Krishna. Or else, I will not go, I will not come. So finally, he did not go to the program. And this is how it went about. So he did not go to the program at all. So what was the consciousness of the disciple or of the devotees there? They wanted to use Dhanvir Maharaj, or they wanted to use, in this case, wanted to use him to get more and more donations. Because if they speak, people might not be willing to come. But then if a sannyasi comes, a sadhu comes, and then he speaks, then they'll be able to give more donation like this. So even here, when the spiritual master, when I'm seeing here, there are instances where the disciples of a guru, they will say, Maharaj, you please don't speak for a long time. Don't give lecture for 1 hour, 1.5 hours like this. You speak for 15 minutes, then we have to put this garland for the donors. We have to call out their names. We have to do this. We have to do that. There's a felicitation function for 45 minutes, but you have to speak. You please finish your lecture within 15 minutes. But then what's the real point of Krishna consciousness? The guru is there. He's on the highest platform. He should speak. He should enlighten people. He should bring them out of their ignorance. Not that we felicitate those donors and other people, and then the spiritual master is not allowed to speak at all. So what is the consciousness of the disciple? That they want to maintain this temple. They want to gain facilities or material. They want more donation. But they're using the spiritual master for their own purposes, for their own this thing. So this should not be the case. Guru is completely independent. We cannot dictate terms on the spiritual master. That is the point. So one should not think that the spiritual master is one's own personal servant. One who is actually advancing will become more and more eager to serve the spiritual master, and thus such a disciple experiences the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one should serve the spiritual master with faith and confidence. So this is also in 11th canto. Krishna speaks to Uddhava. My dear Uddhava, this is the verse. Acharya mam vijaniya navamanena karichit namartya buddhya suyata sarvadeva mayo guru. The spiritual master must be accepted not only as my representative, but my very self. He must never be considered on the same level with an ordinary human being. One should never be envious of the spiritual master, as one may be envious of an ordinary man. The spiritual master should always be seen as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by serving the spiritual master, one is able to serve all the demigods. So one should never be envious of the spiritual master, and one should accept the Guru as his own self. Right? So this is a very famous incident. I've heard many times that once a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada that whatever you remember at the time of death will attain the same state. So Prabhupada said yes. So if you remember about Krishna, we'll go to Krishna Loka. Prabhupada said yes. But Prabhupada, if we remember you at the time of death, what will happen? Then Prabhupada said, we'll get the same result. We'll go back home, back to Godhead. Just so at the time of death, if you remember the Guru, you'll also attain the same destination, because the Guru is non-different from Krishna. By serving the Guru, one can attain the same benefit then one can attain by serving, or it's equivalent to attaining the service to Krishna. So it's like this. We serve the parampara, we go back home, back to Godhead. We come to the level of pure devotion service, pure love of Godhead. We serve the spiritual master because the idea is, the understanding is that we are not serving the spiritual master independently. The Guru is not independent. He is a servant of his spiritual master. And that spiritual master is a servant of his spiritual master. And that's how the parampara goes. So because they have this consciousness, understanding that they are all servants of their own spiritual master, when we do service to the Guru, it directly goes and comes to Krishna. So service to Krishna is direct through the spiritual master. So service to spiritual master is actually a direct service to Krishna only. So that is why it is very important that we this idea of taking initiation and not following the instructions of the spiritual master basically blocks. It blocks our devotional progress. It's just like a flowing river is blocked with dams. When there is a dam, the flowing river does not flow. It's just collected there and there's no water below, correct? When a dam is corrected, unless you open the gates, it's everything sukha, it's everything dried out. So just taking initiation and not following the instruction is just like building a dam on the flow of mercy from Krishna through acharyas, through spiritual master. It will just block. So the instructions of Guru is must. It must be followed. Following the instructions of his spiritual master is serving him. And by serving him, one connects with Krishna. Just Diksha, it's incomplete. Okay, Diksha is must, but then it's not complete if the instructions are not followed. It's just like constructing a dam. So one must be very careful. Service to Guru is on the same level as service to Krishna. And by serving the Guru, one gets attraction or love for Krishna also. So this is, so this is the translation, this is the purport of this particular verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Prabhupada wrote this purport. So he says, this is the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 11:70-27, spoken by Lord Krishna when he was questioned by Uddhava regarding the four social and spiritual orders of society. The Lord was specifically instructing how a brahmachari should behave under the care of a spiritual master. A spiritual master is not an enjoyer of facilities offered by his disciples. Correct? A spiritual master, he is an enjoyer of the facility. If he thinks that he is the bhokta, then he falls down. A guru, if he thinks he is the bhokta, he is enjoying all these facilities. I want to make lots of disciples. I have so many disciples. And all these disciples adore me. They love me like anything. They give so much offering, so much dakshina they give. All my material necessities are resolved in a very nice way. I can live in a palatial building. I can eat whatever I want. I can sleep wherever I want. Not sleep wherever, but in a very luxurious place. I can fulfill all my material necessities and just smile at my disciples. And everything is taken care of. He's actually a fallen spiritual master. Or he's not even a spiritual master. He's fallen from his condition of being a guru. So to be a guru, just like we say, a devotee, if he's a disciple or a devotee, it's to perform devotional service like walking on a razor's edge. So it's much more so applicable to the spiritual master as well. So one who thinks that by having disciples, I will enjoy these disciples, then he is fallen from the position of being a bona fide spiritual master. I have these many female disciples and they all adore me. And one attains some kind of pleasure or happiness from that, this labh, puja and pratishtha, then maintaining that kind of attitude or consciousness does not, his mercy or the mercy that he's attaining or he's getting from his spiritual master, that he's blocking that. Just like a disciple, by not following the instruction of spiritual master, blocks the mercy of his guru. Similarly, by guru thinking himself as the bhokta, he blocks the mercy of his spiritual master that is coming through Krishna. So therefore, it's like a razor's edge for the guru also. It's very, very delicate, a fine balance that one has to maintain. He is superior to his disciples, so he has to take up that position that bhava should be there, that he's instructing, he's a teacher, he's superior to them. But at the same time, he should also understand that he's a servant of his own guru, and whatever he's doing it only as service to his guru. He has taken the position of being a master as a service to his guru. So that consciousness should always be maintained by a guru. If he does not maintain that, then he falls down. Okay, so that should be very clear. So he is not a bhokta, he is not the enjoyer of the facilities offered by the disciples. He accepts these facilities only for the advancement of his disciples. That's all. And he engages all these facilities in his spiritual master, in his guru's service or in Krishna's service. So a spiritual master, when he accepts lots and lots of donations, is not that he is doing it only for himself. Whatever he gets, he spends all the money in Krishna's service. Srila Prabhupada also famously said this, right? That whatever money a temple gets, immediately they should spend it. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati made this point. His disciples used to collect lots and lots of dakshina and they used to bring. And Siddhanta Saraswati used to say, okay, you should not think that now we'll maintain this temple for 1 month. For 1 month our maintenance is taken care of. No, spend everything. Next day, everything is gone. Again, it comes back to zero. Does not matter how many lakhs of rupees have been given in donation the previous day. Next day, it again comes back to zero. And the disciples are pushed again. The sannyasis are sent out to preach. The brahmacharis sent out to preach, to make more devotees, to collect for the donation, for Krishna's service. So donation is actually meant for Krishna's service. Donation which is given to the temple is meant for serving Krishna only. It is not meant for personal maintenance. It's not meant for eating, sleeping, and having a comfortable life in the ashram. Prabhupada is very clear on that. And Siddhanta Saraswati is very, very clear on that. So nobody should be comfortable in devotional life. That's how it is. You should not be in a very comfortable position. You should always be agitated, or you should always be thinking, oh, what will I do, or or how I should serve Krishna. That should be the point. How I should serve Krishna. One should always be in anxiety. One should be in anxiety for Krishna. One should not be in anxiety of how he will be maintained, but should be anxious of how Krishna will be served. How the temple should be maintained. Because even those who are living in the temple or in the ashram, for them, the idea is that the temple is the residence of the Lord. And the Lord is the one who's maintaining us. Prabhupada is maintaining us. Because when we go out, we preach out. We preach. And what do we preach? We preach what Prabhupada gave to us. We distribute books. We tell the same thing that Prabhupada told us. So Prabhupada is maintaining us. Krishna is maintaining us. So temple maintenance or ashram maintenance and our maintenance is actually dependent on how Krishna is being maintained, how Krishna is being worshipped. So everything that comes to the temple, it's actually meant for the deity. It's meant for the Lord. It's meant for Prabhupada's pleasure. And from that, because we are serving them, therefore the maintenance of us is being taken care of. That should be the attitude. That should be the consciousness. It's not that we collect so much of donation and then we are the bhuktas. One should never think like this. Then a spiritual master is like a parent. Without the attentive service of his parents, a child cannot grow to manhood. Similarly, without the care of the spiritual master, one cannot rise to the plane of transcendental service. The spiritual master is also called Acharya or a transcendental professor of spiritual science. The Manu Samhita explains the duties of an Acharya, describing that a bona fide spiritual master accepts charge of disciples, teaches them Vedic knowledge with all its intricacies, and gives them their second birth. The ceremony performed to initiate disciple into the study of spiritual science is called as Upaniti, or the function that brings one nearer to the spiritual master. One who cannot be brought nearer to the spiritual master cannot have a sacred thread, and thus is indicated to be a Shudra. The sacred thread on the body of a Brahmana, Kshatriya or Vaishya is a symbol of initiation by the spiritual master. It is worth noting if one merely to boast of high parentage. It's worth nothing. Not worth noting. It's worth nothing if one merely to boast of high parentage. The duty of the spiritual master is to initiate disciple with the sacred thread ceremony, and after this samskara or purificatory process, the spiritual master actually begins to teach the disciple about the Vedas. A person born a Shudra is not bad from such spiritual initiation, provided he is approved by the spiritual master. who is duly authorized to award a disciple the right to be a Brahmana if he finds him perfectly qualified. In the Vayu Purana, an Acharya is defined as one who knows the import of all Vedic literatures, abides by the rules and regulations, and teaches his disciples to act in the same way. So these are the three things that an Acharya should do. Only out of his immense compassion does the personality of Godhead reveal himself as a spiritual master. Therefore, in the dealings of an Acharya, there are no activities but those of transcendental loving service to the Lord. He is the supreme personality of servitor Godhead. It is worthwhile to take shelter of such a steady devotee who is called Ashraya Vigraha, or the manifestation or form of the Lord of whom one must take shelter. If one poses himself as an Acharya but does not have an attitude of servitorship to the Lord, he must be considered an offender. And this offensive attitude disqualifies him from being an Acharya. So, a spiritual master should always speak what his own Guru spoke. And if he deviates from what his Guru spoke or Guru taught, then he should be considered an offender. So, within ISKCON, I'll not take names, but those disciples of Srila Prabhupada who are not following Srila Prabhupada's instructions, they must be considered as offenders to Srila Prabhupada. And one should not take shelter of them. It's very clear from what Prabhupada is writing here, although it may seem very aggressive or offensive, but then this is what it is. A guru must follow the instructions of a spiritual master, and if he's not doing that and is adjusting things based upon his own speculation and own understanding, then he must be considered as an offender only. And his disciples who are completely dedicated to him will not be able to make progress towards the actual goal. Should be very careful. The bona fide spiritual master always engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By this test, he is known to be a direct manifestation of the Lord and a genuine representative of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Such a spiritual master is known as Acharya Dev. Influenced by an envious temperament that is satisfied because of an attitude of sense gratification, mundaners criticize a real Acharya. In fact, however, a bona fide Acharya is non-different from the personality of Godhead, and there is therefore to envy such an Acharya is to envy the personality of Godhead. This will produce an effect subversive to transcendental realization. As mentioned previously, a disciple should always respect the spiritual master as the manifestation of Shri Krishna, but at the same time, one should always remember that a spiritual master is never authorized to imitate the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Correct? Just to show that he is on a transcendental platform, he should not imitate the pastimes of Krishna with the gopis, for example. False spiritual masters pose themselves as identical with Sri Krishna in every respect to exploit the sentiments of their disciples. But such impersonalists can only mislead their disciples, for their ultimate aim is to become one with the Lord. This is against the principles of the devotional cult. So the spiritual master is the supreme personality of servitor Godhead. He is a servant of the Lord. So that way, in the absolute realm, he is the same as the Lord. But that does not mean that he becomes the enjoyer. The spiritual master is never the enjoyer. This is the classic difference, or the most inherent difference. The spiritual master is the same as Krishna in always. But the spiritual master never identifies himself as the enjoyer, as the bhokta. The spiritual master is always the servitor. He is the supreme personality of servitor Godhead. He serves the Lord. He serves his spiritual master, the acharyas. And the spiritual master, or Krishna, is the bhokta. The guru is never the bhokta. So this is the inherent difference when we say about this guru and Krishna. But in every other respect, the guru is non-different from Krishna. The guru is as opulent as Krishna. Right? And the guru can bestow the same mercy that Krishna can bestow. Actually, he does more. The Lord does not bestow his mercy very openly and frequently as the spiritual master does. So he's the storehouse of Krishna's mercy. You say, samsara davana leeda loka tranaya karunya gana ganatam praptasya kalyana gunana puranavasya vande guroshi charanaravindam. So he is the storehouse of mercy. We do not pray to Krishna that he is the store of the mercy. We do pray, but then the mercy is attained only through the spiritual master because he is the storehouse. Right. Okay. So the real Vedic philosophy is Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, which establishes everything to be simultaneously one with and different from the personality of Godhead. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami confirms this, that this is the real position of the bona fide spiritual master, and says that one should always think of spiritual master in terms of his intimate relationship with Mukunda. Sri Jiva Goswami in his Bhakti Sandarbha has clearly explained that a pure devotee's observation of the spiritual master and Lord Shiva as being one with the personality of Godhead exists in terms of their being very dear to the Lord, that identical with him in all respects. Following in the footsteps of Sri Raghunath Goswami and Sri Jiva Goswami, later Acharyas like Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have confirmed the same truths. In his praise to the spiritual master, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms that all the revealed scriptures accept the spiritual master to be identical with the personality of Godhead because he is very dear and confidential servant of the Lord. Gaudiya Vaishnavas therefore worship Srila Gurudev, the spiritual master, in the light of his being the servitor of personality of Godhead. In all the ancient literatures of devotional service and in the more recent songs of Sri Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and other unalloyed Vaishnavas, the spiritual master is always considered either one of the confidential associates of Srimati Radharani or a manifested representation of Srila Nityananda Prabhu. Right? So then, following in the footsteps of saintly persons, Sadhu Vartamanu Vartanam. In Skanda Purana, it is advised that a devotee follow the past acharyas and saintly persons, because by such following, one can achieve the desired results with no chance of lamenting or being baffled in his progress. And one who does not follow the past acharyas, then he'll end up only lamenting in his whole life, because he will not get the desired benefit that is being promised to him. So this is a purport from Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Srila Prabhupada elaborates on this principle. Those who follow social customs and behavior forget to follow the path chalked out by the Mahajanas, thus they are offenders at the feet of the Mahajanas. Sometimes they consider such Mahajanas very conservative, or they create their own Mahajanas. In this way, they ignore the principles of the Parampara system. This is the great misfortune for everyone. So the past acharyas, or when we say Mahatma, Sadhu Vartmana Vantatam, this Sadhu should also be in the disciplic succession, should also be in Parampara. If one does not follow the footsteps of the real Mahajanas, one's plans for happiness will be frustrated. This is elaborately explained later in Madhya Leela. People are so unfortunate that they do not accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead, they want to be supported by so-called Mahajanas or authorities. Tate chaya darshana haite tatva nahi jani. We cannot ascertain the real truth simply by following speculators. We have to follow the footsteps of the Mahajanas in the disciplic succession. Then our attempt will be successful. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Vani Amritera Dhara. Whatever is spoken by Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an incessant flow of nectar. Whoever accepts his word as the reality can understand the essence of the absolute truth. So, in terms of following pure devotional service, these are the first four. Want to take shelter of the spiritual master, he should accept Diksha and Shiksha from him. He should consider the spiritual master as good as Krishna directly, and he should accept, or he should follow the path which is chalked out by the acharyas. Correct? So these are the first four important. And one who does not do that, one who does not follow the great devotees, or who does not follow that which is given in the scriptures, then he's only creating disturbance for sincere students. Okay. So he says, scripture known as Brahma Yamala states as following: if someone wants to pose himself as a great devotee without following the authorities of the revealed scriptures, then his activities will never help him to make progress in devotional service. Instead, he will simply create disturbances for the sincere students of devotional service. So, right? Aikantiki harer bhaktir utpatayaiva kalpate. Shruti smriti puranadi pancharatra vidhim vina. There's a Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Adi, which mean the Itihasas and other Dharma Shastras as well. Then Pancharatra, Vidhim Vina, the principles which are elaborated in these scriptures. If one takes up to Aikantiki, Harer Bhakti, means Aikantiki, means what? Aikantiki in this verse means even after having attained steadiness. So one who is steadily performing devotional service, but not following Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Pancharatra scriptures, he is only creating disturbance in the society for sincere students of devotional service. It's only creating disturbance. Although he might be a very steady, or he might be very steady in his practice of devotional service. Thus, even after attaining steadiness in the practice of bhakti, if it is executed without regard for scriptural rules, because of no belief in scriptures, then it produces disaster. So, one who claims to be a devotee of Krishna, but does not follow the rules and regulations which is given in the scriptures, then he is only inviting disaster for himself. even after performing devotional service for actually Siddhanta services, Bhakti Siddhanta services for millions and millions of kalpas. Kalpa means right 1000 Chaturyugas. And the night included is 1 day of Brahma, which is called as one kalpa. And if one performs devotional service like this after kalpa, after kalpa, after kalpa, after kalpa also, still he will not be able to achieve the real goal. He will not even come to the stage of bhava, or to speak about pure love of God and going back home, back to Godhead. One has to take shelter of what is given in the scriptures. And what does scripture suggest? Guru Padashraya. The first thing is take shelter of Guru. Krishna Krishik Dikshadi Shikshanam. Then Acharya Mam Vijaniyam. Then Sadhu Vartman Vartanam. These are the principles that the scriptures teach. So one must take this as absolute. One must take this, approach the bona fide spiritual master, take Diksha from him, follow his instructions, consider him as equal to the Supreme Lord, follow the Acharyas, and then study the scriptures under him. And then follow, and then do the principle, then do pure devotional service, then follow the 64 items or the items which are mentioned here. That is proper attitude, that is proper consciousness. Otherwise, it only produces disaster. Aikantika Harir Bhaktir Utpataya Kalpate. Although one has achieved steadiness, but still it's a disturbance in one's own life and also in the life of devotees. So, how does it apply to us? We have to see around within our community of devotees, ISKCON devotees, who is following Prabhupada, who is following the Acharyas properly, Siddhanta Saraswati's teachings, which are given to us, Srila Prabhupada, what is given in his books, who are the devotees who are following it. If they're speculating, then it only creates disturbance in the society of devotees. We see within ISKCON itself, so many different controversial issues keep on coming up. So many, when we say controversial, so many, differences among opinions between devotees. Some people say Varnashrama should be done, Varnashrama should not be done. This is how female Diksha Guru should be there, it should not be there. All these things come up. There's so much discussion, there's so much dissatisfaction, there is no unity. Because people's understanding of what actually the instructions of Srila Prabhupada are is different. How did it become different? Because there is a difference of sincerity in understanding these things. We will not be taking names, but then, no, this is something which we can observe philosophically speaking. Although they may be study devotees, chanting 16 rounds, following the 4 regulative principles, attending artis, kirtans and all, but their understanding would be completely different. And no, how did that happen? It's because one has not accepted the teachings or instruction of spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada as it is. They have not understood it. They have not understood it in a holistic way. And because of that, there are differences of opinion. And that creates schisms, as Guru Maharaj says. No, it breaks into different factions, the whole society. So this is the problem. This is actually the problem. This is what Srila Rupa Goswami is speaking here. This is what Srila Jiva Goswami says. Although you might see devotees who have attained steadiness, but still there is differences. There is disturbance in the society of devotees. Why? Because of these reasons. Because one is not following the Shruti, Smriti, Puranas and other things properly, as given to us by Srila Prabhupada. For us, Shastra means Prabhupada's books, primarily. So if you are not following Prabhupada's instruction, understanding them properly, as Srila Prabhupada taught us, then there will always be differences of opinion. There will always be disturbances in the society. That's how it is. Correct? So we should be very careful to study Prabhupada's. This is the goal of the whole Bhakti Shastra course itself, that we study all these things properly, we understand all these things properly, and then we have a clear intelligence of what we are supposed to do in our own life. And if we see things happening outside, how do we relate to them within the devotee society and outside of devotee society as well? Then Srila Prabhupada writes, those who do not strictly follow the principles of revealed scriptures are generally called sahajiyas. Those who are the sahajiyas, they imagine everything to be cheap, who have their own concocted ideas, who do not follow scriptural injunctions. Such persons are simply creating disturbances in the discharge of devotional service. Correct? In this connection, an objection may be raised by those who are not in devotional service and who do not care for revealed scriptures. Those in 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks, what about those people? The first verse itself is, what about those people who have faith in something, but then it's not mentioned in any of the scriptures? What is the position of them? And what does Krishna answer? He says, faith is of three modes of nature. There's a Sattva-guna faith, there's a Rajo-guna faith, there's a Tamo-guna faith. And those who do not take Yah Shastra Vidim Utsrijya Vartate Kamakarta, Na Siddhim Avapnoti, Na Sukham Na Param Gatim. One who gives up all these Vedic injunctions and he just acts in his own way. Yah Shastra Vidim Utsrijya, they have given up this Shastra, following of Shastra, vartate kamakartha, and do activities only out of their own desire, out of whatever their desire is, which means their own speculation. If they want to follow their own speculation, that's their own desire. Vartate kamakartha, nasa siddhim, they will not attain perfection. Na siddhim avapnoti, na sukham, they will not attain peace or happiness. Na param gatim, neither they will go to the supreme destination. So this is exactly what Rupa Goswami is saying here. Shruti smriti purana di pancharate vidimbina aikantiki harir bhakti utpataive kalpate. Those who have given up, although this one particular one refers to the demons in Bhagavad Gita, who has given up Shastra, but extending that principles in the community of devotees also. If devotees also do not follow the scriptures, then they'll get into a disastrous position, right? Then it produces disaster, Srila Jiva Goswami says. So we should be very, very careful. Now, Buddhism is given as an example. So we'll just take 2 minutes to complete this. So as an example, is seen as Buddhist philosophy. Lord Buddha appeared in the family of a great Kshatriya king, but his philosophy was not in accord with Vedic conclusions and therefore was rejected. Maharaj Ashoka was responsible for spreading it all over India and adjoining countries. And after the appearance of great stalwart teacher Shankaracharya, Buddhism was driven out. So why is we speaking about Buddhism here? The Buddhists or other religions who do not care for revealed scriptures sometimes say that there are many devotees of Lord Buddha who show devotional service to Lord Buddha and who therefore should be considered as devotees, because the Vedic scriptures accept Lord Buddha as an incarnation of the Lord. But Vedic scripture don't have any injunctions of serving Lord Buddha. There are injunctions to serve Lord Nrsimhadev, to Vamanadev, all the different forms of the Lord of Vaikuntha. There's explanation, there's description about all these things. But when it comes to Lord Buddha, we see in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's not even one single injunction that devotees should worship Lord Buddha. It's just not there. Although he's accepted as an incarnation of the Lord. So although he's accepted as an incarnation of the Lord, people speculate, saying, oh, he's an incarnation of the Lord, we should worship him also. But he should not be worshipped because there's no injunction. No Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Pancharatra, they don't give any injunctions or any rules and regulations to worship Buddha. There's rules and regulations of deity worship, of Krishna, of Radha Krishna, of Lakshmi Narayana, of Lakshmi Nrsimhadev, of Vamanadev, like this. So many things are there, but not even one single injunction of Lord Buddha. So therefore, worship of Lord Buddha is prohibited, although he is accepted as an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. In answer to this argument, Rupa Goswami said, the argument is that Buddha is a devotee, Buddha is an incarnation of the Lord, so therefore we should do worship to Buddha also. So to answer, Rupa Goswami says, they cannot be accepted as devotees. Although Buddha is accepted as an incarnation, the fall of such incarnation are not very advanced. To study the Veda means to come to the conclusion of the supremacy of personality of Godhead. Therefore, any religious principle which denies the supremacy of personality of Godhead is not accepted and is called atheism. Atheism means defying the authority of the Vedas and decrying the great acharyas who teach Vedic scriptures for the benefit of people in general. Right? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, Vedana manya buddhya hoeta nastik. Because these people do not accept the Veda, therefore, which means Shruti, Smriti, Puranas. Therefore, they are all atheists. So, although they are worshipping an incarnation of the Lord, they are atheists. Right? So, therefore, they will not attain the perfect. What's the meaning of worshipping the Supreme Lord? Go back to Godhead. Attain pure love of Krishna. But by worshipping Lord Buddha, none of this will happen. One will not even attain nirvana because it's not authentic. Whatever they call as nirvana. Buddha appeared in order to bewilder the atheistic class. Philosophy is meant for bewildering the atheists. Why should Krishna propagate atheistic principles? It was the desire of the Supreme Lord to end the violence which was then being committed in the name of Vedas. The so-called religionists were falsely using the Vedas to justify such violent acts as meat eating, and Lord Buddha came to lead the fallen people away from the false interpretation of the Vedas. For the atheists, Lord Buddha preached atheism so that they would follow him and thus be tricked into devotional service to Lord Buddha or Krishna. So it's understood that by this process, they may gradually come to accepting Krishna as the Supreme Lord. So some progress may be made. So Srila Jiva Goswami comments, how could it be pure Aikantiki Bhakti if there is disregard for scriptures? On the other hand, if it's actually pure Bhakti, how can it produce misfortune? Correct? Aikantiki Bhakti means steadiness in devotional service, but there is disregard for scriptures, when it leads to disaster. On the other hand, if it's actually pure Bhakti, for a form, for incarnation of the Lord, it can produce misfortune. Still, it does not lead to proper result. This verse answers. The devotion of Buddha, Dattatreya, and others whose philosophies completely reject the Vedic scriptures appear to be Aikantiki Bhakti, but that is because of one's misjudgment only. For that devotion completely rejects the scriptures, the Vedas, its Angas, and scriptures following the Vedas. If that is so, then there can be no proper results. For according to the Vedanta, Shastra Yonitvat, the Lord is known only through scriptures. He should be worshipped only through scriptures. Therefore, if one disregards the Vedas and supports scriptures attained through the beginningless authorized disciplic succession, embodying the teachings of the Lord, who is the very source of Buddha and others, how can that bhakti be pure? This should be the meaning. Right? If one disregards the Vedas, supporting scriptures, and he disregards those scriptures which are attained through authorized disciplic succession, which embody the teachings of the Lord, if these are disregarded, then how can that bhakti be pure? This should be the meaning. Okay, so what we have seen the first 4 of the first 10. Okay, so tomorrow we'll try to complete the rest 6 primary regulative principles of devotional service and also move to the prohibitions of what all things we should not do, and then we'll go on from there. So we'll stop. Have any questions regarding what we discussed? Oh, okay. So we'll stop. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai.